I'm Steve, and today I'm going to talk about something interesting. Today, uncertainty. The irony is not lost on me that I've had a hard time defining this one, but here we go. It's by now a cliche to note that we're drowning in information and opinions, but not as information and opinions. A lot of stuff comes at us with urgent certainty. The era of the influencer has brought us TikTok after reel after short of sincere, energetic insistence that this product or that morning routine or an amazing secret will absolutely solve a problem you definitely have. The endless kaleidoscope of the newest and the best is an unsettling aspect of the ruthless commercialization of our digital social lives, sure, but it's not just mindless capitalist predation. We are, after all of us constantly looking for answers. What the digital marketplace is monetizing, in its superficial and profiteering way, is actually a genuine need related to one of the most basic aspects of human existence. Being a person means constantly navigating deep and genuine uncertainty. We are uncertain about what we think, how we feel, what might happen, and what we should do. Being uncertain means confronting the limits of our knowledge or our foresight in our lifelong efforts to persist and thrive, to seek safety and security, to find companionship and community, and to make some sense of the world. When we find ourselves watching or reading review after review to help choose between functionally identical running shorts or car tires, we are playing out a very deep-seated cognitive and emotional drama. Because in life, almost nothing that matters is certain. This is a result of our limited mortal lives. Our personal experience only extends so far. Our memories are changeable and unreliable, and our minds operate using shortcuts and simplifications that often fail to capture the complexity of reality. Famously, psychologist Daniel Kahneman established and popularized the observation that we have two systems of thinking. System 1 moves fast but cuts corners. It's emotional and intuitive, but often wrong. System 2 is slower, more rational and more precise, but takes more time and effort and only comes into play when we take the time and make the effort, which we are, like it or not, reluctant to do. Our modern self-image, at least in the post-industrial, individualist Western world, takes it as common sense that we are reasonable free agents, that we are authors of our own destiny who make considered choices on the basis of well-tested facts. We want to see ourselves as reasonable and good, and we privilege knowledge, rationality, and agency in our implicit understanding of what it is to be good and reasonable. But there are serious and far-reaching limits in the insistence that this is how any of it works. The thinking, weighing, and evaluating mind we so prize and identify with isn't in control in the way we want to believe. It turns out that many of our feelings, our reactions, and even our choices are based on subconscious forces that we retroactively justify. The basic fabric of our consciousness consists of a chain of approximations and best guesses, from how we perceive the world around us to how we reconstruct our memories, to how we decide and act. I make it sound like a house of cards, but it works brilliantly well. If it didn't, humans wouldn't have survived very long as a species. Our mental schemas and sensory processing systems are amazingly good at coping with the unfathomable complexity of the real world. They might not be perfectly accurate, but they are good enough. And this is an important distinction. We often want to believe we can know things for sure, that we can have a clear, unambiguously correct grasp of things. But our own minds and much of the natural world just doesn't work like that. Thinking about uncertainty means dealing with the gap between some imagined theoretical perfection of perception and knowing and the messy approximation that is our lot as human beings. Like most of us, I've been confidently wrong more times than I care to remember. One of my most hated experiences is hubris followed by humiliation. I recall at about 10 years old, proudly announcing on the bus to one of my first days at a new school that I had checked my math homework with a calculator. I was young enough and weird enough, and this was long enough ago, that it was meant as a brag. The teacher had us publicly correct our work. I got 5 out of 10. Immediately, a girl from the bus said something sarcastic about my calculator skills. I don't remember exactly what, but I still remember the shame more than 40 years later. Being publicly overconfidently wrong remains one of my least favorite things. It makes no sense that I'm podcasting. I'll have to unpack that in another season. This memory is a reminder that knowledge is always social, even though our immediate experiences of knowing or not knowing are strangely private. Thoughts and assertions can arrive in our minds mysteriously fully formed. Sometimes, when I want to confidently claim something is true, I stop and ask myself, do I know that? Not how do I know that necessarily, but more fundamentally, do I actually know that? What does knowing feel like? Because we use a variety of verbs, often interchangeably, to express various relationships to this sense of certainty. Knowing, believing, feeling, thinking, remembering, trusting. It's amazing how often I belatedly realize I'm not at all sure if it's true, let alone where it came from or why it came so confidently to mind. Kahneman and Tversky's work on System 1 and System 2 thinking started out with the observation that even highly trained experts were often wrong when making snap decisions in the area of their expertise. Years of training and painstaking work shepherded by System 2 don't guarantee correctness when we operate using System 1. So our own minds are an inherent source of uncertainty. But we are also faced with the inherent complexity of the world and the fact that it's constantly changing with the passage of time. I'll make a distinction between facts and reality. This is the sort of thing that philosophers have argued over for millennia, but briefly I'll define reality as the state of the world. A fact, on the other hand, is something we can say about the world. Facts can be empirical, which is to say, learned from measurement or observation. They can also be abstract, determined as a matter of logic or theory. Now let's look at the deceptively simple case of how many people live on Earth. Here's an abstract fact. There are a certain number of people alive right now. This is true in a commonsensical way, just because of the nature of the world. People live and people die, and there are only so many of us. But making that abstraction even slightly more realistic raises problems. The boundary conditions of life are fuzzy. Medical authorities worldwide use different definitions of death. And of course, it's theoretically and empirically unclear when a life begins. So even very general statements of fact based on logical definitions can run into uncertainty around the edges once reality gets involved. And this shows how much the definition of a problem or situation can affect our attempts to measure or resolve it. Things get even more challenging on a practical level when it comes to determining how many people there actually are, because no one knows precisely. The practicality of counting is insurmountable, and births and deaths make the total a constantly moving target. When we talk about almost any population, even on the much smaller scale of a town, say, we use estimates based on intermittent census data and other government records and extrapolations based on birth, death, and migration rates. So we can say with certainty that the worldwide population of people is knowable, but we also can't directly measure and know it exactly. There is always some version of this gap between the state of the world and our capacity to grasp it. The question, what temperature is it, depends massively on exactly where you measure it and how. The temperature in front of your home and behind it will be different. When climate scientists talk about the rising temperature of the planet, they are averaging and interpreting millions of measurements from tens of thousands of sources worldwide every day. And those are examples where we actually have robust measurement systems and statistics. We have a very detailed understanding of population dynamics and global temperatures, thanks to decades of effort by thousands of researchers and technologists. Most facts aren't just out there to be intuited or realized. What we know has to be carefully defined and painstakingly researched to be known with any confidence as fact. The thing about science is that it is both our most reliable and robust source of well-investigated and tested facts, and, in theory anyways, humble about its definitiveness. One of the basic principles of scientific investigation is that facts are established provisionally. Things are considered proved only on condition of our current state of measurement and analysis, and under certain conditions. In theory, the door remains open for contradictory evidence. Science is constantly discovering, confirming, and disproving things. And as scientists are prone to say, answering one question tends to raise several new ones. We are often far more ignorant than knowledgeable, especially about matters as complex as consciousness, metabolism, and the immune system. One reason why the science about nutrition changes over the years, for example, is that it's just very hard to study. People are complicated in every respect that matters to connecting food and health, our behavior, memories, social biases, and metabolisms. Which is to say nothing about the added complexity of the social, economic, and political contexts in which we live. These social determinants of health, as they are called, reflect all of the shared and interconnected effects of the social and natural world on our health outcomes, and they turn out to be incredibly important. But these are the sorts of things that can largely only be studied statistically at a population level. They aren't real to us in our day-to-day lives, even if those lives are profoundly shaped by them. And this sort of complexity arises all the time. For example, there's a point at which temperature becomes an idea and not a reality. There's how warm I feel, which is an immediate bodily sensation, even if it's highly dependent on my clothing, activity, and personal sensitivity to heat and cold. I might be having a different experience of it than someone right next to me. There's the temperature in my home, which I have some control over and that makes direct sense to me as well. The temperature outside my front door is harder to interpret thanks to sun and wind and humidity. We have diverse human physiology interacting with a physically complex system, but we still directly perceive it. Once we make the jump to talking about the average temperature of my town, for instance, we are dealing with something that's descriptive in the abstract, but not necessarily true here and now. Average temperatures over time are another layer of abstraction. Changes in those averages, yet another. We respond most intuitively to the temperatures we directly experience. And there is no direct experience of a change in the 30-year average of maximum summer temperature. The fact that summers are now generally hotter than they were when I was a child is a purely intellectual fact, despite its ultimate grounding in sweaty reality. We have difficulty believing this sort of statistical and abstract knowledge. It demands the hard cognitive work our brains resist doing. And add to that, we have to trust the sources and the processes that produce it. We aren't predisposed to dwell on complexity and uncertainty. In fact, quite the opposite. We have a real hunger for simplicity, for yes or no, good or bad thinking, and to be validated in our choices. Questions on Reddit often fall into a few familiar patterns. One of the most common is, what is the best of something? Where can I find the best gyoza in town? What is the best finish for my woodworking project? What's the best sewing machine? These are impossible questions to answer because people vary in their tastes and needs and resources. Any choice, even as simple as these examples, always involves trade-offs and balances that will be assessed differently by different people and in different situations. But in the face of all the information in the world, we want to cut through the decision fatigue to the one clear, objective answer we hope exists to quell the anxiety that we aren't doing it right. This desire for the one true and correct answer denies rather than solves the messy reality that we are imperfect creatures getting along the best we can until we die. The internet tantalizes us as an infinite well of knowledge. It helps sustain the mirage that perfect knowledge or an ideal answer exists and is attainable. And we don't want to feel alone in this. Another common Reddit question takes the form, am I the only one who does this, thinks this, feels this? Human beings are deeply and fundamentally social. We are highly responsive to social pressure. Social injuries such as humiliation and isolation are extraordinarily painful to us, and our inclinations and preferences are deeply shaped by the need to be part of a larger group, without whom, in earlier eras, we couldn't survive. And so cognition, knowledge, and certainty are social. We believe things that are acceptable to the groups we identify with. In effect, we externalize a lot of the labor of thought by using our social groups and commitments as a filter for ideas. We are more likely to accept things that others around us find acceptable. So social cognition is another shortcut we use to make sense of complexity and act in the face of uncertainty. This social nature makes us susceptible to social engineering. This can take the form of peer pressure. It can take the form of fraud and scams. There are all kinds of scams that play on our cognitive weaknesses. Many incite strong emotions and create time pressure to short-circuit our capacity to think critically. I've personally experienced the seemingly desperate person with an elaborate and rushed story about a medical emergency and needing $50 for a cab. My parents once received a call from someone pretending to be my sister, tearfully saying she was arrested and urgently needs to pay a fine right away to avoid jail. These stories are inevitably flimsy when considered from a distance, but in the moment they cynically play on our immediate instinct to help. It's a sad irony that scams are effective because when push comes to shove, most of us are reflexively trusting and kind. They also play on the norms of social cognition by relying on charisma and confidence. Especially in the worlds of wellness and the manosphere, tastemakers and self-promoters operate almost entirely on charisma and force of will. They confidently offer simple answers and decisive hot takes that are all too often simply sales pitches for some supplement or online course. But dubious information confidently delivered is often and easily believed. Shirtless men in grocery stores start shouting about vegetables or seed oils being toxic, and suddenly these nonsensical claims start circulating as facts. Our current media environment maximizes our exposure to a torrent of dubious information and minimizes our capacity to think critically about it. This is an amazing irony, given that our networked pocket computers connect us to much of the world's knowledge. But more information doesn't necessarily lead to more clarity. It's partly the wealth of options we are offered that leads us to simplistically seek out the one true answer. And when it comes to complex intangibles such as climate change and vaccine efficacy, statistics and science are plentiful, but impenetrable to non-experts. We are contradictory and complicated creatures. Somehow having a skull full of fat and electricity brings us the world and lets us experience, communicate, and act out of emotions ranging from joy to hatred. And we have arisen in, received, described, and tried to survive and flourish in a universe that is breathtaking in its complexity. It's kind of amazing how much we know about how we know and how we perceive. I like to think of this meta-knowing as part of our perhaps distinctive capacity to be self-aware. We're at one and the same time miraculous and fallible. Knowing what we do about our cognitive systems doesn't magically free us from their weaknesses, but it does offer us some strategies to be less wrong more often. Be aware of who validates you and who you validate. Our need for social acceptance feeds our tendency to divide the world into us and them. Sustaining and defending our beliefs and self-image fuels a lot of misogyny, racism, and xenophobia. The means by which we simplify the world to make it understandable are inherently ethical and political. Diverse groups of people can have radically different experiences of the world. The narrower our orbit, effectively, the less we know. Slow down. Digital culture values and drives constant acceleration. The endless scroll of selfies and short-form videos exposes us to an overwhelming volume of information in an underwhelmingly superficial way. The instant in instant messaging denotes the impossible urgency and immediacy of modern communication. When we move fast, we double down on our biases and shortcuts, which maximizes the influence of mis- and disinformation or influencers who want to seem credible. Doubt well. It takes a lot of time and energy to question things, and there's a reason why do your own research has become a red flag. But one of the best defenses against misinformation and fraud is doubt, so doubt carefully. Learn to be comfortable with uncertainty. Unfortunately, there isn't a best coffee table. You can't know for sure if that other job will be better, or if you should have a second child. This isn't a world in which we can be fully sure about most things. But we feel bad about this and cast around for certainty as though it were possible. It's hugely helpful to try to make peace with our essential and unavoidable limitations. We are ingenious, scared monkeys making our way together through a bizarre and effectively infinite cosmos. Of course we want to make sense of it all. Of course we want to feel in control. But there are deep and essential limits to certainty. What happens next is rarely for sure. Preserve your capacity for uncertainty, because uncertainty is possibility. Thanks for listening. Something Interesting is an audio essay anthology about how it's strange and complicated to be a person in the world. It explores the philosophical, the political, and the personal. This podcast was written, recorded, and produced by me, Steve McCullough. Check the show notes for my sources, further reading, and music and art credits. Please direct all correspondence to thesomethinginterestingpod@gmail.com. And may your days be full of interesting somethings.